In your heart, you might harbor a hope to forget the urge to move forward, yet why does the image of this person linger in your mind every day? Even knowing the pain they caused, why does your heart yearn for them? And why does every notification sound make your heart race, anticipating their message, no matter what? Don't deceive yourself. The longing isn't for the person themselves, but for the idealized version you created in your imagination. It's a yearning for the illusion of love, for a reflection of what you desire. Carl Jung once stated that what a person cannot confront within themselves will manifest as their destiny. Perhaps this is exactly what's happening now. This isn't merely about a breakup. It's about facing a mirror that reflects what you lacked the courage to see before. This discussion is far from common self-help advice or attempts to just move on as if nothing happened. The truth here might be painful, touching hidden wounds, but ultimately, it will bring liberation. Reality is often harsh, and what you perceive as love might just be a shadow clinging to someone who feeds your unhealed wounds. Your subconscious desperately seeks validation, even if it means remaining tethered to someone who destroys you. This isn't love. It's imprisonment. Imagine that the agonizing attachment, emotional pain, and oppressive anxiety you feel when faced with being ignored or rejected are, in reality, reflections of your inner world, the unexplored depths of your own personality. This will be a profound, at times painful, yet transformative journey into the core of human consciousness. The goal of this exploration is to uncover hidden mechanisms, understand why we cling to those who cause us suffering, and most importantly, find a path to liberation. Be prepared. The truth might be unpleasant. However, only by looking it in the eye can you stop searching for love externally and begin to discover it within yourself. Have you ever wondered why such a strong connection forms with someone who seems to bring nothing but disappointment? Why, even when fully aware of the insults, manipulation, and emotional pain, something inside desperately yearns for these relationships to continue? The answer lies not in the other person, but in the depths of your own self, perhaps even deeper than you can imagine. Renowned psychoanalyst Carl Jung viewed relationships as more than just social interactions. For him, every emotional bond is a reflection of the unconscious. When we fall in love, we don't see the real person. Instead, we project onto them parts of ourselves that we are unaware of or have been forced to suppress throughout our lives. Jung called this phenomenon psychic projection. A connection with another person is often driven not by their actual qualities, but by what they represent in our subjective world. At times, this person unwittingly becomes the embodiment of the anima or animus archetypes, fundamental images of feminine and masculine principles slumbering in the depths of the human unconscious. These archetypal figures symbolize missing elements, a yearning for a sense of wholeness. However, when projected onto a specific individual, they create a powerful illusion where completeness is mistakenly perceived as dependence and love as submission. The paradox is that initial admiration and passion transform into obsessive preoccupation when the real person fails to match the idealized image created by projection. In this situation, an individual begins to lose their own identity. They settle for less, justify dismissive treatment, hinder their own development, all under the guise of a love that, in reality, never existed in the imagined form. This was not true love, but an emotional need skillfully disguised by an unconscious fantasy. As long as a person continues to search externally for what is missing internally, they are destined to remain captive to another's gaze. They become a hostage to expectations, rare displays of attention, and validation that never truly arrives. The reason lies in the subconscious belief that only through another can one achieve a complete self. However, as Carl Jung warned, until these hidden aspects of the personality are integrated, a person will repeatedly fall into the same scenarios, repeating painful cycles and choosing similar people with different faces. And this is not chance, but an unconsciously predetermined destiny. How then can one break the chains of this dependence? How can one stop existing solely to satisfy another's emotional needs and reconnect with their authentic self? This question will be addressed in the next part of this narrative. It will delve into the unconscious drive for approval and the high price paid for betraying oneself. Too early in life, a person learns that to receive love, they must be pleasant. To earn someone's favor, they need to be good, useful, and desirable. This leads to the meticulous construction of a persona, a mask designed to meet the expectations of others. However, each time an individual adapts to external demands, they drift further from their true essence. Carl Jung defined the persona as the character we form to adapt to society, which is a necessary condition for existence. But when a person begins to identify exclusively with this mask, they suppress their authentic self. This is precisely what happens in relationships characterized by emotional dependence. The individual dims their inner light to keep another person close, suppressing their desires, pain, and very essence, just to avoid rejection. The constant search for validation of one's worth in the external world, in approving glances, gentle touches, flattering remarks, often proves futile. An endless stream of compliments and assurances of uniqueness cannot fill an inner void if a person senses falseness in their actions and motives. It's like trying to satisfy hunger with a breath of wind, illusory and without prospect. This oppressive emptiness isn't a longing for a specific person, but a profound need to reclaim the self, lost for the sake of social acceptance. It's a desire for freedom of self-expression, suppressed by the fear of rejection. As long as self-worth depends on the opinions of others, every absence will be perceived as a personal catastrophe, every silence as a sign of rejection, and any criticism as a deep wound. It is in this unstable ground that anxiety takes root, manifesting as tightness in the chest, agonizing insomnia, intrusive thoughts, and constant emotional vigilance. Deep down, the fear isn't so much about losing the other person as it is about confronting the need to look inward and realize one has lost their own identity outside of that relationship. However, anxiety is not an enemy, but a valuable signal pointing to an internal conflict, a struggle among various aspects of the personality for the right to be expressed. Attempts to ignore these deep-seated urges only intensify their persistence. Anxiety in destructive relationships is not merely an unpleasant side effect. It's a manifestation of the soul's yearning. To effectively overcome anxiety, one must move beyond fighting symptoms and address the root causes, the internal discord it attempts to heal by revealing the truth about oneself. Further analysis will delve into the mechanisms of how anxiety arises from inner fragmentation and what revelations it holds about a person's authentic essence. Anxiety, as it's often called, is actually a muffled cry from those parts of the personality that have been forgotten, rejected, or severed in the name of love. It is nothing less than the soul's desperate attempt to signal inner distress, to indicate that one has become mired in emotional falsehood. The price paid for maintaining certain relationships is exorbitantly high, and the authentic self is the one that pays it. In light of Carl Jung's teachings, the human psyche appears as a multi-layered structure encompassing conscious and unconscious elements striving for harmony. However, when an individual suppresses their true essence to maintain connections with others, this harmony shatters, giving rise to a severe internal schism. This discord manifests as anxiety, which is not merely a fear of abandonment, but rather a silent battle between what a person genuinely feels and what they allow themselves to express. Each time tears are held back to avoid burdening others, each time a false, "I'm okay," is uttered while a storm rages within, this schism only deepens. Anxiety, therefore, acts as a protective mechanism of the psyche, a desperate attempt by the subconscious to restore lost balance. Inside, a true battle unfolds. On one side, the false self craves external validation, while on the other, the true self suffocates, crying out for authenticity. The feeling of tightness in the chest arises from attempts to squeeze into frameworks that do not inherently suit one's individuality. A racing heartbeat is nothing less than the soul fleeing from a life alien to it. The constant fear of losing another person is rooted in the deep realization that one's own identity has already been lost. And this yearning finds no solace in a return message, a temporary reunion, or new promises. The problem lies not with others, but with the estrangement from one's own essence. As long as a person continues to search externally for what can only be restored internally, anxiety will remain their constant companion. According to Jung, the inner fragmentation of the personality is not a tragic end, but rather a call to action, an impetus for returning to wholeness. It is an invitation to look into the depths of yourself, to listen to the voice of longing, in order to reclaim the lost parts of yourself left behind on life's journey. Here, one of the most powerful and dangerous forces of the unconscious, the shadow, enters the scene. The psychological shadow fuels the repetition of destructive behavioral patterns, explaining why a person repeatedly chooses what destroys them. To achieve true freedom, one must have the courage to face what has been carefully hidden from oneself. A person might believe they consciously choose their circle of acquaintances, but in reality, this decision is often made by the most hidden part of their mind. It's not the person themselves who chooses pain, but their shadow, the hidden, denied, and suppressed part of the subconscious that governs their life. Carl Jung defined the shadow as the sum of qualities a person does not wish to be but truly is. It encompasses everything that society, parents, or culture have labeled as wrong, ugly, and shameful, in which a person, striving for acceptance, has buried deep within their soul. However, to bury does not mean to destroy. Suppressed aspects of the personality transform into psychic energy, awaiting their moment. And relationships become the favorite stage for the shadow to manifest. People attract those who reflect their shadow, unconsciously repeating the same cycle with different individuals. Names and faces change, but the pattern remains consistent. Self-denial, inflicting pain, self-flagellation, settling for crumbs of attention mistaken for love. This isn't merely bad luck, but a destiny shaped by one's own inner darkness. Why does a person enter relationships with emotionally unavailable individuals, narcissists, and manipulators? The answer lies in these relationships reflecting hidden aspects of themselves. Perhaps they suppress their anger, need for attention, or desire for control, submitting to those who embody these very qualities. The shadow manifests through projection onto another person, causing hatred for traits not accepted within oneself, and love for those one has disavowed. This cruel game will continue until a person confronts their shadow. Until they acknowledge its existence, it will attract situations that mirror it, so they can finally see it. Jung asserted, "What you resist persists. What you accept transforms." It's not enough to simply flee from toxic relationships. It's necessary to understand what attracts them in the first place. This requires courage, the courage to look within and acknowledge that part of the chaos stems from within. A person carries old wounds, unresolved traumas, and suppressed desires that demand integration, not avoidance. How then can the shadow be transformed into a source of strength? How can one break the vicious cycle of emotional self-sabotage and restore harmony in relationships, primarily with oneself? Jung called this the process of individuation, a path of returning to one's center. Individuation can be the starting point for emotional liberation. Now that you have seen your shadow, are you ready to begin healing? A turning point arrives in life when the awareness of a divided existence becomes an unbearable burden. It's no longer possible to pretend, presenting one facade to the world while an inner voice desperately calls for something else. In this moment, when emotional pain reaches its peak, genuine healing begins. Carl Jung referred to this as individuation, a complex psychological process in which a person liberates themselves from the role of a puppet, controlled by masks and subconscious wounds, and begins to reveal their true essence. However, individuation should not be seen as an easy stroll. It is, rather, a courageous confrontation with oneself. One must come face to face with everything they have diligently avoided: complexes, traumas, and destructive behavioral patterns. It is necessary to open one's eyes to their own games and acknowledge their complicity in the pain experienced, not because there was a desire for suffering, but due to not knowing another way. The personality was shaped under the influence of feelings of inadequacy, a need for approval, and the fear of rejection. Individuation begins by ceasing the pursuit of those who don't see you, and instead turning your gaze inward with ruthless honesty. It's crucial to ask yourself, why do I neglect myself so much to keep another person close? What am I trying to compensate for? What part of myself do I give away every time I seek love? These questions are painful, but they are precisely what tear down the veil of illusions. In the process of individuation, lost parts of the soul are reclaimed. Every boundary set, every choice of silence instead of pleading, every no uttered instead of compliant agreement, these are affirmative yes to your deepest self. It is a renunciation of the false self, created to please, and the construction of a new self that is whole, complete, and free. The culmination of this process is a reunion with your inner center. Other people cease to be your salvation. There is no longer a need for approval to feel worthy, or for pleading for love to feel complete. You return to your body, your space, your truth. Jung asserted that individuation is the realization of one's self, the core of the personality, free from masks in the tyranny of the shadow. At this moment, understanding dawns that to truly feel alive, you don't need those who cause you pain. You only need to remember that pain is not your essence, but merely a chapter in your story. However, before concluding this journey, it's essential to understand how to apply the acquired knowledge and practice, how to break ties with those who cause pain, and most importantly, how to transform this rupture into inner strength. Likely, the reader has arrived at these reflections because, deep down, they already felt a need for change. Perhaps it was difficult for them to pinpoint the source of this inner anxiety, and they might have mistakenly perceived it as a sign of weakness, dependency, or an excessive need for someone. However, they now realize that it was a desperate call from their own soul, a silent cry signaling that they have endured too much suffering, made immeasurable sacrifices, and have become so disconnected from themselves that they barely recognize their reflection in the mirror. The process of liberation does not imply forgetting. It doesn't mean erasing memories or denying past pain. Rather, it means acceptance, understanding, and letting go. It's the realization that the person who caused you pain was part of a specific life stage, but their presence is not required on the subsequent pages. Maintaining a connection with those who have a destructive impact is comparable to attempting to cross an ocean while dragging a heavy anchor. Such efforts are doomed to fail. Make no mistake, liberation is a painful process. Breaking invisible ties requires significant inner strength, as it's not just a breakup with a person. It's the burial of hopes, fantasies, idealized notions, and expectations that were never meant to materialize. However, this pain is sacred, for it is the pain of rebirth. It is a necessary grieving, allowing you to return to yourself, to occupy the space once filled by another's absence. There's no longer a need to diminish yourself to fit into the confines of a restrictive relationship. There's no need to conform to the expectations of those who cannot see your true essence. The time has come to choose yourself, to prioritize your own interests, not out of selfishness, but from a place of honesty towards yourself. By continuing to try and salvage broken connections, one only moves further away from their own salvation. As Carl Jung stated, the greatest privilege in life is to become who you truly are. Perhaps this is the bravest choice you can make right now, to abandon attempts to change others or fix the past, and instead make a firm decision to live in accordance with your own truth, free from masks, chains, and the repetition of patterns that bring only suffering. Every person faces the necessity of liberating themselves from circumstances, thoughts, or relationships that hold them back in order to move forward. It's important to ask yourself, what exactly prevents you from experiencing the fullness of freedom? The answer to this question can be the starting point for change. Imagine that the comment section is a symbolic space where you can leave behind everything that no longer serves your well-being. It's a personal acknowledgement addressed to yourself, a declaration of intent to let go of the past and open the doors to the future. Allow yourself to be honest and sincere in this ritual of liberation.